everyone and welcome to Smart World with CNBC. Bonjour à tous et bienvenue dans Smart World avec CNBC. At the top of this program, les derniers sondages à moins de 2 jours des élections américaines. On décrypte les résultats de Starbucks avec son PDG sur CNBC et le rachat du service de livraison à domicile Freshly par Nestlé US. C'est parti, let's go! Les instituts de sondage ont-ils retenu la leçon de 2016? Alors que beaucoup d'experts parient déjà sur une victoire de Joe Biden, la situation s'avère plus compliquée que ça. La course à la Maison-Blanche est encore serrée. The 2020 election race is still tight between Donald Trump and Joe Biden.
What if the polls are as wrong in 2020 as they were in 2016? So what you got here, these are the current poll averages in the battleground states. And what we did is we looked at each one of these battleground states and said, how much were the final polls off in 2016? And said, let's apply the same miss. And what would that do to 2020? And you see the picture does change. You start to see a little bit more red here. Trump picks up Wisconsin, North Carolina, Ohio, Iowa. This would not be enough of a switch, not enough of a poll miss to put Trump over 270. But you can see he'd be knocking on the door. It would change the race significantly.
Of course, they can be wrong one way or the other.
Very good point. And in 2012, in fact, the election before 16, they were wrong the other way. They underestimated Barack Obama's support that year. So we also said, what if these polls are missing like they missed in 2012 on Barack Obama's support? What would that look like on Election Day? And there suddenly you see Biden starts to run away with a bunch of states. Trump only ends up with Arizona. Biden wins the lion's share, and he wins them pretty easily, too.
Yeah, Texas, really has me head scratching. We've already had more Texans vote this year already than voted in all of 2016. Do we have any idea who they are and what's motivating them? I mean, are they going left or right?
Yeah, it's a fascinating thing. We could put those stats up again. You could see past the 2016 level. Demographically, our friends at Target Smart have come up with some data. They say there are, relative to 2016, a little bit more college-educated white voters in the electorate, a little bit lower right now in the non-college whites, the Trump base, college whites, the Democratic base. But the big question is, does that just mean that on Election Day, that Trump demographic is going to turn out more and level things off? Or have the Democrats built a more permanent advantage here? The Election Day is what will tell us that.
Selon les derniers sondages locaux, Joe Biden mène Donald Trump sur les champs de bataille du Midwest. La course est cependant serrée en Arizona et en Caroline du Nord. Le candidat démocrate détient une avance considérable de 12 points sur le président Donald Trump dans le Michigan et de 8 points dans le Wisconsin. Et pour rattraper leur retard, les candidats sillonnent encore les États pivots, et ça même à 2 jours du scrutin. President Donald Trump and former Vice President Joe Biden are finding their way from the Rust Belt to the Sun Belt and back again. Let's take a look at the last battlegrounds before the elections.
I'm Ellison Barber in Miami-Dade County, and Florida early voting is up across the state. Here in Miami, about 54% of registered voters in Miami-Dade have already voted early. That's absentee, mail-in, and early in-person voting. If you talk to voters here, you get a sense of just how close this presidential race is. One woman told us that she waited until she stepped into the voting booth to decide between Biden and Trump.
I'm Chris Jansing in Georgia, where early voting is absolutely annihilating records. Democrats counting on groups from the NAACP to Stacey Abrams' fair fight to get out huge numbers of black voters, while Republicans are counting on a visit this weekend to a very red area by President Trump because voting there early has been lagging behind. When you have a race this close, it always comes down to who mobilizes their voters.
I'm Priscilla Thompson in Texas, where more than 9 million people have cast ballots early. That is an all-time high, shattering the record for total turnout set in 2016. And it was then that Donald Trump won the state by 9 points. That is the slimmest margin of victory for any GOP candidate in 2 decades. Senator Kamala Harris is in the state campaigning today, hoping that she can help flip it blue for Democrats.
I'm Dasha Burns in Michigan. About 2.5 million Michigan voters have already turned in their ballots. That's about half of the 5 million total turnout in the 2008 presidential election, which was the highest turnout in Michigan history. So far, this poll showed Joe Biden leading in this state. He's also outspending the president in ads here. COVID cases have been on the rise in Michigan and across the Midwest, which could give a boost to Biden. The former vice president will need to turn out the black vote here and will also need to get some moderate Republicans like those in the suburbs of Grand Rapids to vote blue.
I'm Brian Sullivan in Rochester, Minnesota, a state where both candidates will appear in today in a late-stage push to swing voters their way. Economy, health care, and issues of racial and social justice at the top of mind for voters, with 1.7 million absentee ballots already having been requested here in Minnesota, in a state that both candidates want and both candidates may need.
À quelques jours du scrutin, les démocrates veulent récupérer le trio Michigan, Pennsylvanie, Wisconsin. Quant à Donald Trump, il s'attaque à la Sun Belt, composée de l'Arizona et la Géorgie. Ces États sont depuis longtemps dans le camp républicain, mais la récente diversification des populations peut les faire basculer dans le bastion démocrate. Un électorat dont on parle beaucoup en ce moment, les femmes. Selon les sondages du Center for American Women in Politics de l'université de Rutgers, aucun candidat n'a jamais recueilli autant de soutien féminin que le candidat démocrate Joe Biden. Let's see how women are going to impact this election.
As a lifelong Democrat, Paula Benson never used to talk politics with her neighbors.
Forsyth County is a very red county and a very red state. So yes, for most of my time here, I've tried to publicly at least, keep quiet about that.
Until now, her neighborhood is in Georgia's 7th congressional district, one of the rapidly growing suburbs across the country where Democrats are hoping to flip once solidly Republican seats. The race here is wide open after the current congressman, Republican Rob Woodall, decided to retire. Now the Democrat and GOP candidates are in a dead heat. Georgia's 2 Republican-held Senate seats are also toss-ups, as is the presidential race. And women like Benson are driving a lot of that momentum. Nationally, women have donated $2.5 billion to political campaigns, more than double what they gave 4 years ago. Analysts say President Trump's style and policies have been particularly polarizing among women. Benson, married to a black man and the mother of mixed-race children, said she is tired of racial injustice.
It's been a need. I need to speak out. I just can't stay quiet any longer. And I found some friends who actually do think like me and have given me the courage to speak out a little bit more.
But there's energy on the other side of the aisle as well.
I am a big believer in less government involvement.
Democrats are trying to push the Equality Act.
Basically, bottom line is because I believe in freedom, and I don't think...
Debbie Welchel organized this video campaign to help women connect to the GOP. She's watched the district turn from red to purple, and now she's mobilizing other moms by focusing on kitchen table issues.
We have affordable health care, our taxes are at a good place, and for our business, regulations have been loosened a little bit, and so I think we just want to keep things as they are.
Chef, the party that can win in the cul-de-sac could end up in control of Washington.
Selon une série de sondages, l'attitude du président envers les femmes ainsi que sa gestion de la pandémie sont des préoccupations majeures pour les électrices cette année. Selon le même sondage, les femmes qui voteraient Donald Trump sont-elles très préoccupées par les questions raciales. Le doute plane encore sur les élections, mais c'est aussi le cas sur les marchés. Investors don't like the uncertainty. There is now more volatility as investors worry about the outcome of the presidential election.
Why do you think we're so much worse than we were, say, a month ago in terms of the market action? We basically erased October's gains. What's the big deal?
I think the big deal, Melissa, not to make light of it, is really COVID. Even the uncertainties around the election and some of the disappointment over tech earnings, I don't think are the real drivers. I think that when you've got over 90,000 cases in the U.S., when you've got month-long lockdowns in France and Germany, which potentially could spill over, not just in health terms, but in economic terms to the United States, there are issues going forward. And so our third quarter GDP numbers kind of rear view mirror. When you look at the jobless claims and add pandemic assistance back into yesterday's number, it's still over 1 million. So this notion of a V-shaped recovery, one, I think has been misguided from the start. And two, I think we're looking at a W and a K going forward where, it's very choppy, very, sluggish recovery. And then also those who do well do better and those who are not faring so well do worse. So I think that's really the order of the day, and that's what's got the market's attention at this juncture.
Yeah, and Laureen, what an extraordinary week it has been in terms of not just the selling pressure, but the volatility spike that we've seen. The volatility index is up, 38 or so % on the week. So how are you positioned going into the final couple months of the year, seeing that the elections are in just days and presumably, hopefully, we will have a clear winner in a matter of days as well?
Well, first of all, we expected the volatility that we're seeing right now. When we look back in September, we saw that the VIX contracts that were ending in October, we saw they were selling at a premium. So we fully expected this kind of volatility and had planned for it. And I think after the election, we're going to see the VIX come down. I think we're going to see a more stable market. And I think that we're seeing now potentially a rotation away from tech and into these other areas of the market that haven't seen the same kind of run-up. For instance, value stocks or even mid and small companies.
Les investisseurs ont besoin de clarté concernant les résultats politiques. Mais cette fois-ci, la situation est si confuse que de nombreux investisseurs ne savent pas sur quoi baser leurs décisions d'achat et de vente. Dans cet environnement, la situation la plus favorable au marché serait simplement un résultat électoral extrêmement clair avec au moins 300 grands électeurs pour le vainqueur. Et je vous le rappelle, on sera en édition spéciale le 4 novembre au matin de 7h à 9h pour décrypter avec vous les derniers résultats des élections américaines. Les entreprises, elles, remontent doucement la pente en temps de pandémie. Starbucks earning top estimates as sales rebound quicker than expected in US and China. Starbucks fait mieux que prévu et affiche des résultats supérieurs aux attentes. Let's listen to Starbucks CEO Kevin Johnson on Q4 earnings and getting customers back in stores.
Well, first of all, the shift that we see in consumer behavior has been certainly as people work from home and school from home, they'll visit the Starbucks that is closer to their home. So a lot of the shift in traffic has been out of central business districts into more suburban areas. Now, fortunately, over the last 10 years or so, we've been building a lot of new stores in suburbs. A lot of them have drive-throughs. Those are helping us significantly right now. But we're not abandoning central business district. In fact, what we're doing is what we're calling trade area transformation. We're transforming that central business district by repositioning stores. And repositioning stores means the following. We're going to shift some percentage of those stores to this new Starbucks pickup format because we know that's what many customers in those central business districts want. Think of it as a walkthrough where a drive-through is appropriate in a suburban market. And so with that repositioning, in some cases, we are closing an existing Starbucks store that's more of a cafe to then sign a new lease and reposition and build one of those Starbucks pickup stores. That transformation is going to take place over the next 12 months. That is also giving me a lot of optimism about the future. Why? Because anytime you see a massive disruption, whether it's a technology disruption or a disruption in consumer behavior, I believe it is those businesses that identify the disruption and understand how that's going to shift in the future. Those that invest early and get there first are often the big winners. That's exactly what we're doing. We're accelerating trade area transformation over the next 12 to 18 months in those dense metropolitan areas, and that's going to serve the company well.
Kevin, existentially, because you and I know each other for many, many years, the third place I like to go, read the paper. People still read papers, read a book. There's one on the Upper East Side. I got some time. I just get in, sit there for a while. How can Starbucks still be our third place when there's some people who don't wear masks who seem to be bent on infecting me with an illness that I don't think would be very good to have?
Well, it's a great question, Jim. What we've optimized for right now, today, in the world of COVID, are customer experiences that are safe, familiar, and convenient. Now, by being safe, all the store protocols we have, we require masks in our stores. We have social distancing in our stores. We know how to operate in a safe environment. Now, what a lot of people are craving right now, they've been, sheltering at home, working from home, schooling at home, is something familiar, safe, familiar, and convenient. That's what we've optimized for right now. But we're doing it in a way that really preserves that third place experience because think about what's going to happen post-vaccine, post-therapeutics. you know, we're all kind of suffering from this shelter at home fatigue. You know, we want to get out. Human beings want to get out and they want to socialize. They want to be part of a community. They want to sit there and enjoy their coffee with others in their community or with their colleagues or their friends, or they want to sit and read the newspaper in our stores. What we found today, we've now opened over 60% of our stores in the United States for limited seating. And the minute we open for limited seating, customers come back and they're in the store, limited seating. But here's my prediction. Once we get post-vaccine and post-therapeutics and we're able to then reopen that third place, there's going to be more demand than there has ever been because people are craving that third place experience. We are craving human interaction. We're craving the opportunity to be a part of a community and to socialize with others. And so we're going to serve safe, familiar, convenient right now, but we are setting up for that period post-vaccine, post-therapeutics, where people come back and they enjoy that third place experience that they've known for decades.
Starbucks a déclaré un bénéfice net au quatrième trimestre de 392 millions de dollars contre 802 millions de dollars un an plus tôt. Mais même si le nombre de transactions a diminué, Starbucks garde le cap. Les clients dépensent davantage par commande. Starbucks affirme que ses clients achèteraient plus de boissons froides et de boissons à base de plantes. Deux options qui ont toutes deux tendance à être plus chères et plus volumineuses. Certains acteurs du secteur agroalimentaire tiennent le coup mieux que d'autres. Nouvelle acquisition pour Nestlé. L'entreprise s'offre Freshly, une société de livraison de plats diététiques à domicile. L'opération valorise pour l'instant Freshly à 950 millions de dollars. Steve Presley, Nestlé USA Chairman and CEO, joined CNBC to talk about why Nestlé is acquiring a meal prep company during the pandemic.
And for us, really, the time to get in was almost 2 years ago when we made a first minority interest investment in the company. And we think as consumers continue to evolve in how and where they shop and how they meet their food choices, we think Freshly was a really interesting company. There was a food tech startup with really fast and innovative and a great fit for us as we invested a couple of years ago and started to learn over the last 2 years more and more and admire more and more about the company. And the acceleration of e-commerce through the pandemic certainly triggered the desire to complete the deal now.
I guess, Steve, there's so many companies like this out there now. We've got a graphic here, in fact, of some of them. Do you think there needs to be consolidation? Do you think some of them will go bankrupt in the years ahead if they don't have backing from a big company like you?
For us, I think Freshly is clearly the leader in this prepared meal space, and we think was the right target for Nestle. And for us, this will be a high-growth segment. I think if you look at most of the research, it'll be a $15 billion category. So I think there's plenty of room for people in there. We think we've got the best brand in the space with Freshly, and we think there's tremendous runway of growth for us to drive this business forward. And then hopefully we end up expanding that leadership position.
It is a question, though, about the sort of viability of these businesses. We saw what happened to Blue Apron once it went public. How do you tell which ones are going to come out on top and which ones won't? And is this a profitable model?
I think Freshly is a bit of a unique business versus some of the other ones where it's not a meal kit. It's actually a prepared meal delivered to your house that offers real healthy, convenience, prepared meals. And so this model can be a very profitable model and not only profitable, also a high growth model. So I think each one of those businesses have very different and distinct issues, but we feel good about the long-term projectability of this business.
En 2017, Nestlé a acheté une part d'environ 16% de l'entreprise afin d'évaluer et de tester le marché. Actuellement, Freshly envoie plus d'1 million de repas par semaine à des clients dans 48 États différents. Les ventes devraient s'élever à 430 millions de dollars cette année. L'annonce de l'accord entre Nestlé et Freshly a d'ailleurs été publiée sur Twitter par l'entreprise. Les services communication en ont fait leur outil préféré pour annoncer les rachats ou les fusions-acquisitions. Cependant, avec la pandémie, la croissance des utilisateurs a ralenti. Twitter revenue rises 14%, but user growth fails to impress.
We're delighted to talk about the quarter and all the great things that happened. First, remember, we grew our ads revenue 44% sequentially in Q3. Because of a much larger audience, 42 million more people using Twitter than we had a year ago. The improvements to our revenue products, the choices we make as we lead the service that makes it easier for advertisers to give us their next dollar, and all the events and product launches that came back in force in Q3. Now, we did have a big surge in usage in March. And the great news about that is we're retaining that group of people better than we have historical groups because of all the product work we've done. We don't get surges like that all the time. And so the way it's flowed through our monetizable daily active usage, we ended up growing our DAU by 1 million sequentially this quarter, but 42 million year over year. We're really excited about the fourth quarter because whether it's on the advertising side where this will play out differently than any fourth quarter we've ever seen, or with the U.S. election happening here in the United States, there are great advertiser and engagement and audience opportunities for us as well.
I want to talk about the election and the advertising market in just a moment, but just let's get back to, I just want to talk about the users just to put a button on this, in large part because that's what the investors were focused on. What do you think you have to do to increase that number come next quarter?
Well, we've done a lot of things to make sure that when people want to find out what's happening in the world and what people are talking about, they will come to Twitter. I'll give you a couple examples. Today, 70 million people follow a topic on Twitter. That was basically zero a year ago. It was 50 million last quarter. When people follow a topic, whether it's a hashtag for a stock like Twitter or a topic like investing, they let us do the work for them to find the tweets that they'll care about most. When we do that, they engage more, they click on more things, they retweet more things, they comment more frequently. And that's what Twitter is all about, is creating and enabling and informing conversation for people. So topics is a great example of this. Second is, you brought up the election. We've done so much work to make sure that we can be a trusted source for conversation and information before, during, and after the election. So this is a great audience opportunity for us right here in the United States, where 20% of our audience and almost half of our revenue is.
Le chiffre d'affaires de la société s'est élevé à 936 millions de dollars, en hausse de 14% par rapport à la même période l'année dernière et de 37% par rapport au deuxième trimestre. Les analystes s'attendaient à des revenus de 777 millions de dollars. Selon le CFO de Twitter, la bonne nouvelle est que nous arrivons à garder nos utilisateurs, contrairement à d'autres réseaux sociaux. Alors que les États-Unis enquêtent sur la responsabilité des GAFA, l'OCDE prépare l'application d'une taxe numérique. Selon l'OCDE, les détails définitifs de la fiscalité numérique seront réglés d'ici le milieu de l'année 2021. Bill Morneau, former Finance Minister of Canada and OECD Secretary General candidate, discusses his bid for the top job and finding a global solution on digital taxation.
It's almost not possible to do enough. We're in an extremely challenging phase. I think we're seeing governments around the world, to the extent they have the capacity to do so, to support their people as much as they can through this challenging time. But we need to understand that it's going to be a difficult and rocky recovery, and using the fiscal space that we have, pushing as far as we can to really support people is absolutely the right thing to do. It's what we need to do during this time. This is the time to make sure that people can get through this and we can have an economy when we get out, hopefully at the end relatively soon.
What role do you think the OECD can play in helping to rebuild after the pandemic?
Well, having been a finance minister during the course of the emergency, what I can tell you is there was no playbook for any of us. We all had to come up with new policies to support people without any clear sense of exactly how they would work. In the next phase, what the OECD can do is gather and help to make sure that we have an understanding of the evidence of what's worked and what hasn't worked, where we can put our efforts to help with recovery. That sort of understanding of the situation, analysis of policies to come out, in particular where we can focus our energies to have a greener recovery, that'll be critically important. A central place like the OECD that's got a rigorous approach to looking at things is absolutely critical to helping countries to get through this.
One of the tools that the OECD has been pushing for to help offset the cost of the pandemic is the cross-border digital tax, a hugely controversial measure that has led to the threat of tariffs from the Trump administration in the U.S. Clearly, American interests are different from others because most of the tech giants are domiciled in the U.S. So how do you find common ground against this backdrop when it comes to the digital tax?
Well, first of all, let's just agree that it's important. We want to make sure that the digitization of our economies continue, and people need to support that. They need to see that the taxes are fair. So there's a real issue here that needs to be resolved. I think the way we get to a conclusion is to recognize that for the digital giants, it's better for them to understand what their situation is. They need to understand what their tax situation is in different countries. So they have a vested interest in getting to a conclusion. I hope that if I'm the next Secretary General of the OECD, as you know, I'm looking towards that potential, that I can act as a broker between the European perspective and the American perspective and make sure that we encourage the industry to continue investing, but do it in a fair way that recognizes where their value is coming from.
Is there any alternative to a cross-border digital tax like this?
In my estimation, the only way for us to make this work is to come to a conclusion, because otherwise there'll be a series of different national actions which will make it difficult for the continued digitization of our economies. So I think that we need to get together, work to get to a solution, and certainly that would be among my very first priorities if I end up as Secretary General of the OECD.
Face au retard des négociations de l'OCDE, le Royaume-Uni, la France et l'Espagne vont de l'avant avec leurs propres taxes nationales sur les services numériques. Ils se joignent à l'Italie, la Pologne, la Turquie, l'Autriche et la Hongrie qui ont déjà instauré de nouvelles règles au niveau de leur territoire. Bon en avant pour l'intelligence artificielle en temps de pandémie. New robots help fight COVID-19. Therefore, they enhance contactless delivery. Les robots en développement peuvent s'occuper désormais de la livraison de nourriture, mais aussi de la désinfection des hôpitaux. Regardez.
Robots beam into schools in New Mexico, hit the streets in Michigan, and soon lend a hand at COVID testing sites in Texas. First stop, Ruidoso, New Mexico, where high-tech COVID killers are being unleashed in schools. It's called Light Strike, and according to the company that makes them, the robot beams out UV light, destroying 99.9% of all pathogens, including COVID-19.
It is really what many would have thought science fiction come to reality. When the robots are finished, I feel comfortable having students come in the classroom.
So the district bought 6 bots at $125,000 each. Next up, Ann Arbor, Michigan.
My ultimate goal here is to bring robot technology out into the world in such a way that it makes everyone's lives better.
Like this food delivery bot, Matthew Johnson Roberson's latest invention. It's being tested right now at 7 locations in the area, including this Korean restaurant.
It's like the next level contact-free delivery.
The restaurant uses a tablet to hail the robot, drops in food, and the package rolls out for delivery. It's operated remotely and sends customers a text when it arrives. And the best part?
It's cute as a button and it shows up on time.
Last stop, Austin, Texas, where robots are in development to help speed things up at COVID testing sites.
The robot is the lab. A patient will come up to the machine, take a serialized tube, spit in the tube, hand it to the machine.
Inside the machine, a robo-arm goes to work processing the sample. The entire test is done right there.
Basically does the work of about 8 technicians, 6 times faster roughly.
And getting the results is faster too. Just hours to know if you have the virus or not. For the news, I'm Andrea Day.
Le robot de désinfection est par exemple très demandé en ce moment. Les hôpitaux chinois ont été les premiers à en acheter. Plus de 2000 robots UVD du fabricant danois Blue Ocean Robotics avaient été envoyés à Wuhan dès le début de la pandémie. Thank you all for being with us. Merci à tous d'avoir participé à ce format 100% hybride. See you very soon for the rest of international news. Et j'espère que vous serez avec nous dès le 4 novembre de 7h à 9h pour une édition spéciale élection américaine. À très bientôt sur Bismart.